Okay, so we are continuing with the eighth ikar, the eighth principle, which we're going to try and finish tonight, and page 178. And if you remember, we were trying to understand the fact that there are differences of opinion, whereas the Torah we said is the origin, all of it comes from Hashem, but at the same time, we have to grapple with the fact that there are many different opinions on lots of the different topics. So how can those two things be true together? So, page 178, identifying the missing fragment. He gives a very nice martial parable to explain this. Suppose you sit down with your children to do a 388-piece jigsaw puzzle without the benefit of a picture of the full puzzle. Rifling through the contents of the puzzle box, you see that the puzzle seems to have only 387 pieces. We're obviously talking about someone who has too much time on their hands and counts the number of pieces before they start. But okay, one piece is missing. Hoping to locate it, you turn to your children who've already done the puzzle and ask them to describe the missing piece. If they remember what the completed puzzle looked like, they might be able to help you. I would say unlikely before the puzzle has been made, but it's possible. This would be akin to asking the Bali Masorah, remember those transmitters, the sages, the transmitters of Torah, for a missing piece of Torah information. Chances are, though, the children will answer, how should I know? Indeed, how should they know? But suppose you went ahead and connected the other 387 pieces, right? So you did the entire puzzle. The picture is now clearer. It's a countryside scene with a barn. The barn, of course, is fire truck red with white crossbeams. Smack in the middle of the barn is a small hole where the missing piece belongs. Now you can see the missing piece must be red with a touch of white on the edge. Can you describe it perfectly? No. The details can be suggested, not guaranteed, but a pretty good estimation can be made. Depending on the quality of the surrounding details and intricacies, as well as the size of the missing piece, your estimation might even be provable. The key here, though, is that this determination is not being made based on your own opinion or preference. It's not a matter of what color you favor or what you want the piece to look like. Your opinion has value only insofar as it reflects the truth of the picture itself. And I really like the mashal. I think it's a very, very nice parable. Because if you think about it, if you would take something which didn't fit and you would put it in that piece of the puzzle in the middle of the barn, which is missing, then number one, the piece wouldn't fit and you could see straight away the shape was wrong. And number two, obviously the design, the colors wouldn't fit in with the rest of the picture. And immediately you'd be able to see there's something wrong here. Now, at that point, the sensible thing to do would be to say, look, we've got it wrong. Then the piece must be something different, or the colors or the shape, etc. They've got to be something else. We've got the wrong piece. But the other alternative would be to say, oh, well, in that case, we're going to change the whole puzzle. Let's make a new puzzle. Let's make a brand new puzzle. And therein lies the work of the Baalei Masorah, the sages who have that bigger picture, that even when there are pieces of the puzzle that we say one piece gets forgotten, it gets blurry, they're not sure about what something actually means or how it was actually handed down, they can reconstruct it to an almost very, very precise degree because they can see the rest of the puzzle. So let's continue. Our Chachamim, our sages, from the time of Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel and onward, use nothing but the established word of Hashem as their tools. The only acceptable yardstick of proof was, and remains, the evidence presented by other pieces of the Masorah. Sometimes parts of the picture indicate that a missing fragment looks a certain way, while other parts of the picture indicate otherwise. This is how they differed. They offered two reasonable versions that were both direct products of established Masorah, which means we can now understand why there would be two different opinions. Because it could be a situation where that missing piece of the puzzle, you could look at it and you could understand that it would be one way, and then you could look at it differently and it would be slightly different. As long as both of them are they're building up their picture from the puzzle itself, i.e. the words of Hashem. If they would just say, forget what the puzzle looks like, I'm going to go to the cupboard, get a completely different puzzle and take a piece and we'll just use that one, then obviously it's not going to fit. That would be objectively wrong. However, as long as they're building up the picture based upon the other 387 pieces of the puzzle, even if they come out with a slight nuance, a slight subtlety, or even a very different opinion on what it looks like, as long as they're coming from the place of the established Masorah, they're building upon the shoulders of everyone that's gone before them and upon everything else that we know in Torah, then in that case, it is a valid opinion. Both of those would be valid opinions about as to what that puzzle piece, the missing puzzle piece looks like. That is the idea, and I think it's a very nice mashal to understand machlokas, to understand how we can have two different opinions, why they would be different when they're all built from the word of Hashem. He continues, the beauty of debate. The Mishnah in Avos teaches us that any argument that's for the sake of heaven will endure, while an argument that is not will not endure. Okay, call machlokas shehi l'shem shamayim, machlokas for the sake of heaven, so for kaim. What does this mean? If two people are engaged in a heated debate for purely altruistic reasons, we'd assume the better outcome would be to reach a speedy and amicable agreement. Why would an everlasting argument be beneficial? The answer in the case of Torah machlokas is that both arguments contain truth. If each person is occupied with his own concerns and ambitions and proposing nothing more than his personal preference or opinions, we would certainly hope that the two sides should arrive quickly at a fair resolution, ending the debate. Right? If it's just about what I want versus what you want, or it's my own desires, or it's anger, wherever it's coming from, my own emotions, in that case, I need to sort it out. We should end the debate. But if two people are heavily engaged in an honest pursuit of truth, with each one sincerely analyzing and delving deeper into the will of Hashem, then we view everything they say with reverence. Even if ultimately the halacha does not follow one person's opinion, the aspect and perspective he has uncovered is of eminent value and should be cherished. His opinion should endure eternally because it reveals one more brilliant ray of the diamond's refraction, another genuine aspect of Hashem's will. Fascinating thing. Meaning, very often we look at argument and we say, right, who is correct and who is wrong? Right? That's how we look at it. And therefore, we find it challenging when there's an argument in Torah because we say to ourselves, well, one of them is rubbish and one of them is true. So why would I learn two different opinions? Why, when I go to the rabbi, is he going to tell me, well, sometimes like this, but it depends, and other times you do like that? One is right and one is wrong. So the difference is that no, because when we're discussing Torah, then both of them can be true because they're both delving into the will of Hashem. And Hashem's Torah can contain space within it for the truth that this one says and the truth that that one says. Again, as long as they're basing what they say on the Masorah, on the tradition. By the way, I'll tell you something even more than that. What would happen if somebody, a very, very great sage, when he was younger, would look at things and he would say, look, my opinion is that this is permitted. And he writes a whole explanation about how it comes to be permitted. And he says, this is permitted. When he's older, 20 or 30 years later, he looks at it differently. And he writes a whole reason as to why it should be forbidden. What would be? And the answer is that both of them could still be valid perspectives. Because there's a slightly different way of looking at it, which has changed his mind, that from the fact that it is permitted to now that it's being forbidden, but nevertheless, both of them are using the valid Masorah. They're both of them building upon the shoulders, trying to establish what that missing puzzle piece is. This has actually happened once with Moshe Feinstein. A person came up to him and said to him, and asked him a question. He wrote a whole response, and he said a certain way. And he said to him, but actually, you've got it written in one of your books that you wrote many years earlier, and I just found it. I just discovered you said differently. And when Moshe said to him, so it's a machlokas. There's two opinions. Fascinating, which means, right, what he was teaching him was they're both valid. Meaning I had the opinion over there. If you feel, and that makes most sense to you, then in that case, you would be allowed, you learn up the whole thing properly, and you feel that makes most sense to you, you'd be allowed to follow that opinion as well. Now, this is what makes most sense to me. So therefore, you can have those two different opinions, again, as long as they're based on the valid truth and they've been built up using all of the sources, the other puzzle pieces. He continues. The self-serving arguments of Korach and his followers, bottom page 179, were nothing but meaningless expressions of egotism, and as such they evaporated with the fall of Korach. The arguments of Shammai and Hillel, on the other hand, contain not an iota of self. Remember, like we spoke about before, that the idea is that the sages were not arguing based upon anything that happened in their time, nor were they arguing based upon their own personal desires or wills. They were true assessments of the will of Hashem, and truly warrant endurance for posterity. Furthermore, not only are their ideas treasured, but their passionate debate itself is to be admired. Picture a family in the aftermath of the passing of a mother. If the children did not enjoy a close relationship with their mother, her belongings won't mean much to them, and they might just dump them all unceremoniously or hire a company to dispose of them in an estate sale. But if the children felt a close loving bond with their deceased mother, then they will likely pore over her personal effects and even argue over who gets her candlesticks, her honey dish, and her recipe box. The fact that Klal Yisrael, the Jewish people, have argued, debated, and struggled mightily over even the most minuscule details of Torah is a glorious testament to the extreme value we place on Torah and the importance we attach to discerning the truth. The loss that precipitated the machlokas is indeed dreadful, but the machlokas itself, the unwillingness to settle for anything less than the whole truth, is absolutely Beautiful. Which means a lovely idea. Again, the fact that we care so much about the details, which others from the outside may say, what is the difference? You put your menorah that side of the door, you put your menorah on the other side of the door, you do it this high, you do it that high. What difference is it really going to make? And the answer is when you love something, then the differences do make a very big difference. Then those small things, those small keepsakes, those are treasured. Those are things which make a very, very big difference. And therefore, we want to keep it and we want to make sure that we do it exactly right. And I tell you, I have to say to you, I know I like argument. I like machlokas, not in terms of arguing with people, but when you see two different opinions, it opens things up. When you see a chumash and you've got Rashi says like this and Ramban says like that, you start thinking and you start deciding, well, he says like this because of his opinion, and where's he coming from with his opinion, and which one fits better in the text, etc., etc. It's the beauty of seeing those divergent opinions that really opens something up and enables you to think about it on a much deeper level. I find a lot in school that girls sometimes find it unnerving. There's two different opinions, and some of them will be thrown by it. And I'm saying like, well, this is great. We found two different opinions. So therefore, that's I think you have to get into when you're learning, you have to start enjoying that debate, enjoying the back and forth, and savoring the fact that we've got these two different worlds or perspectives and ways of looking at this, and enjoy that. Let's look at the bottom page 180, a difficult question. How can both be right? The question remains, however, how the chasm in interpreting Hashem's will can be so large. How can we have two conflicting opinions and still say that each is plausible? For instance, in the dispute over whether the Torah requires shechita, that's slaughtering for fowl, for birds, one opinion says it is mandated, i.e., it's a Torah law, while the other says it is not, it's only rabbinic. Which opinion reflects Hashem's will? There's a dispute over the status of Jerusalem today. One opinion is the city was sanctified for all eternity, while another holds that its elevated kedusha, its holiness, was limited to an earlier time. How can both of these opinions be correct? Either the city today retains its full sanctified status, or it does not. How can the two opposing views both be the true word of Hashem? In describing the intense debates and differences between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, the Gemara makes a remarkable statement. For 3 years, Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel debated each other. These said the halacha follows their view, and these said the halacha follows their view. A heavenly voice went forth and declared, Elu ve'elu divrei Elokim Chaim. Both these and those are the words of the living God. But the halacha in practice follows Beis Hillel. Right? These are key phrases here. Elu ve'elu divrei Elokim Chaim. Debates between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel carried on for 3 years unresolved until a decisive voice rang out from above. The verdict? Both Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel are expressing the actual views of Hashem. The law, though, is expressed by Beis Hillel, which means until the point of halacha, like practicalities, because you need to know what to do, you cannot follow two opinions through on a practical level. But until that point, both viewpoints are true and valid. How can this be? The Ritva, who's one of the classic commentators on the Gemara, he addresses this point, wondering how it's possible to say both these and those are the words of the living God. When one prohibits something that the other permits, he answers, citing the Baalei HaTosfos, another commentary on the Gemara. When Moshe ascended to heaven to receive the Torah, he didn't merely receive a package of facts. Certainly, every Torah law was conveyed with clear instructions. Do this, don't do that. This is commendable, that is loathsome. Kashrus, Shabbos, monetary laws, and all other areas of halacha were clearly delineated. Each of these laws, however, came not alone, but with a full package of detailed background. What is the rationale behind this halacha? How is it affected when other laws are involved? Explaining the entire background to Moshe Rabbeinu served as an invaluable comprehension aid, for it enabled him to understand the exact parameters of where and when each law applied, right? So when Moshe Rabbeinu he receives the Torah not just as a list of do's and don'ts, which by the way is never a good way to learn anything at all. He receives it together with its explanation in order that he can then pass that on, he can teach it to others, and he can know how to apply it in difficult circumstances. In presenting this full range of reasoning to Moshe, Hashem revealed both the logic supporting the halacha as well as the logic that would theoretically have dictated otherwise, meaning he showed him both sides of the coin, both sides of the argument, which is always important. I think it's important in every area of life, even the ones which we are going to maybe dismiss, but it's important to see where are they coming from. Let's try and understand. So similarly in Torah as well, Moshe is presented with both sides, even if Hashem is saying to him, this is the one which is correct, this is the one which is right and correct, and you'll be listening to and you'll be following. But he's shown this is the way you may come to a different conclusion as well. In fact, says the Ritva, Moshe was shown 98 different angles, top of page 182, on each matter. 49 reasons to permit and 49 reasons to prohibit. That number 49 is synonymous with the Omer, right? That's completion of wisdom. It's the 49 steps that lead up to the giving of the Torah, the 49 levels of wisdom. So that's what it symbolizes. He's shown the 49 of each side. Practically speaking, this doesn't change the law an iota. If the Torah says the bluefin marlin is kosher, or the gecko lizard is tameh, is impure, is not kosher, these are incontrovertible facts. Now, there are logical reasons to argue the fish ought to be not kosher, or the lizard ought to be deemed kosher. It doesn't affect the halacha. Essentially, Moshe was being told that despite the dozens of potential reasons to the contrary, the rationale for the final halacha is eminently superior to these considerations. It's not that the other lines of reasoning are untrue, it's that they don't carry enough weight to sway the halacha. I mean, you're going to have to make a final decision. And therefore, even though there will be ways of looking at it this way, there'll be ways of looking at it the other way, but nevertheless, at the end of the day, there will be a final decision which is made by weighing up all of those different arguments and deciding which one of them is going to carry the weight of being true, the weight of being valid in terms of what we actually do. We're going to stop there because the next analogy is going to take a little bit of time. So we almost finished. We're at the top of page 182, and perhaps something that we've at least seen so far that we've learned together, and something which is appropriate for Lag BaOmer as well, is the depth of Torah. If Moshe Rabbeinu can go up to the mountain and see 49 ways that would point towards this, 49 ways that would point towards that, then there's incredible depth. Because very often when we approach a Torah law, we don't even have one way of understanding this and one way of understanding something to the contrary. So therefore, there's a lot more to go. And the fires that we light on Lag BaOmer, the custom, the minhag to light a bonfire Lag BaOmer, symbolizes the fact that that Torah lights up the world. It's the depth of the Kabbalistic Torah, in fact, that Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai brings into the world when he writes the Sefer HaZohar, which is learned by the Kabbalists. And that depth of Torah is there in every single word and every single thing that we do. And we don't always get to see the 49 ways that go this way and the 49 ways to go that way, but we do our best. And the first step is perhaps just acknowledging that it's there, acknowledging that there's depth, and then we're in a position where we can do our best. And that perhaps is a lesson from the 8th Ikar as well as for the fires of Lag BaOmer as well. Thank you.